Every year in Ghana, the same thing happens during flood season. The rains come, the roads disappear, the city shuts down, people lose property, cars, sometimes their lives. And the immediate conversation is about the flood and what government has done to prepare for it, etc. But today I want to draw a similarity between floods and reputation crisis in our regular lives. Because you see, the flood is never the story. The flood just reveals what was hidden when the skies were clear. And the same thing applies to us when it comes to our personal brands. It is when the clouds come out that you realize that there are blocked gutters to deal with, there's poor planning, there's weak infrastructure, there are years of neglect, bad decisions, and all of those are exposed or revealed by the rain. It's the same thing that applies to reputation crisis. My name is Kenny Ribeiro, and you're watching another episode of Reputation Radar, where we talk about reputation, crisis, and building influence and authority. One of the misconceptions that people tend to have is that a crisis will destroy your reputation. Sometimes it does, but very often a crisis actually reveals what your reputation is. When there's a scandal, it reveals what the culture has been. A customer complaint will reveal the quality of your service. A leaked email reveals your character. Public backlash for a government reveals your communication failures. Negative press highlights whether or not you actually had the trust of the people in the first place. All of those things just uncover what is actually there. And I find that most of the time, we tend to look at a crisis as a problem because it revealed it ruined everything. It made everything worse. But could it be that all the crisis did was expose what had been building quietly over time? Because you see, a strong reputation is rarely destroyed by one moment. And this is coming from someone who works with brands that have reputational crisis all the time. A weak reputation is not destroyed by one moment either. The thing about your reputation is that when a crisis hits, it just points a spotlight on what is already there. Sometimes it's when you're in a crisis that you discover that your friends were actually not your friends. They were just acting like they were friends. But if you have put in the infrastructure, if you have built a good reputation, when a crisis comes, chances are that you will not take a hit the way someone else who has not built their reputation will. So let me give you an example. A customer who has enjoyed years of excellent customer service will extend grace when mistakes happen rather than go on TikTok to say, cancel this vendor and don't work with him. Employees who trust leadership are less likely to assume the worst when there's a crisis or a difficult time. Audiences that have typically experienced honesty are likely to believe an explanation from you when controversy arises. Why? It's kind of like reserve tanks, like how we save water for a rainy day. Trust behaves like a reserve tank, and reserves are not built in an emergency. You draw from them when the emergency comes, but you should have built them long before the emergency arrives. And that is why I believe reputation management is actually more important than crisis management, because people always want to talk about what to do when the flood comes, when the storm comes. How should we respond? What should we say? What should our statements be? Should we apologize? Should we ignore it? All those things matter. But by the time the flood or the crisis comes, many of the important decisions have already been made. The work that should have happened or has happened would have happened months or years earlier. It would have built whatever it is in the culture, in the systems, in the framework you've developed, in the habits, in the relationships that you have, in the trust deposits that you have made or neglected to make. And very often, that is where you would see whether or not you actually have a reserve tank to draw from, or you actually have a plan to fall on when a crisis occurs, or in this case, when the flood comes. So I always tell people that the storm will only test your system. It will reveal the flaws in your system, not just in nations, not just in institutions, but in businesses, in brands, even in personal brands, in people's brands, because eventually every one of us will experience a storm. It's inevitable. there'll be a mistake, there'll be some sort of scandal, there'll be a backlash, there'll be a misunderstanding, there'll be a difficult season, there'll be something we didn't see coming. And when that moment comes, the question is not simply, how do I survive this? You want to probably ask yourself, what does this reveal? So that you can make sure that I put in the structures to make sure that this storm will not arise a second time. Or perhaps this is something I neglected and that is why the storm happened in the first place. So our first instinct in a crisis should not be, how do I survive this? How do I respond? It may probably need to be, how did we get here? What's led us to this point? So that you are in the best position to ensure that it does not happen again. What you don't want to do is be like those of us in Ghana that are experiencing this in the flood system, where the rain comes and then it exposes what we have been neglecting all the while simply because the sun was shining. So if you've had this and you are either a public figure or someone who is thinking about visibility and is also concerned about what to do when there's a reputational crisis, start building now. Start building that reserve tank now, because you will need it when the storm comes. And what you want to do is make sure that when the storm comes, you're ready. My name is Kenny Ribeiro, and this is Reputation Radar. Thank you for watching.